It's a decision no one wants to have to make. That's at the heart of an extremely tragic case, and it could help change our Charter of Rights. Sam O'Neill loved how running connected her to family, and it's photos like this that her parents still hold on to. Sam died at age 34 after a brutal and painful year-long battle with cervical cancer. Sam had opted for MAID, medical assistance in dying, but in the final, most difficult hours of her life, she was instead sedated and moved to another care facility. The reason? She was in palliative care at a Vancouver Catholic hospital, and faith-based institutions won't allow MAID to be performed. Now, as painful as it is, her family is facing the BC Supreme Court trying to ensure that that won't happen to anyone else. The case is being supported by Dying with Dignity Canada, and CEO Helen Long joins us now. Thank you so much for your time, Helen.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
First, please tell us, how's Sam's family doing?
Sam's family is doing pretty well. I was with them on Monday, and they're, considering everything going on, I would say they're holding up well.
Well, that's certainly good news. Sam's mom is also the lead plaintiff in this case before the BC Supreme Court. Tell us about this case and why the family felt it was important to go ahead with it.
Yeah, Sam was a 34-year-old young woman with cervical cancer who, unfortunately, at the end of her life, which, things moved fairly quickly, she found herself at St. Paul's Hospital, had made the decision to have MAID, and when she decided that the time had come, was not able to have MAID in that hospital. So she was forced to transfer. They moved her by ambulance in a stretcher. She was in a lot of pain. So they had heavily medicated her. They got to the ambulance. It was quite a difficult transfer. Her dad was holding the ambulance IV pole within the ambulance to keep her hydrated. They had to administer more pain medication on the transfer as they drove down the road. It was about a 25-minute journey, and she was writhing in pain. So they administered some additional medication. By the time they reached the hospice where the MAID was provided, she was not communicating. She was basically unconscious. So, Gay, her mom, had to literally move things out of the way of the doorway. It was a bit of a difficult situation. She said afterwards that it appeared to be a storage room that had been hastily cleared for Sam. But they finally got there and got things set up. And sadly, Sam never regained consciousness. So they weren't able to have that last moment with her. And I think for Gay and Jim, this really became about not wanting any other family to have to go through what Sam had experienced, and what Sam's family and friends had experienced, and not being able to have those last few minutes with their loved one.
Yeah, it's even, I think a lot of Canadians would be surprised that the conversation about whether or not this faith-based hospital would provide MAID would have come up long before the final hours of her life.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation had come up. Sam was aware that you could not have MAID at a faith-based hospital, including at St. Paul's. However, the last time she went to the hospital, they took her by ambulance. And in Vancouver, in many places, you don't get to choose which hospital you go to. So while Sam was aware of that policy, there are a lot of people who end up in hospitals that they may not choose to go to, or who are in hospitals in a situation where they don't anticipate they'll be having a MAID discussion. And then when it comes up, they find out that they have to transfer. There's also situations where people build a care community. So Sam had been in and out of hospital, had been treated numerous times at St. Paul's. She felt comfortable there with the staff and with the team. So, while it's one thing to be in the hospital and know that you're not able to access care that you might need at some point. It's another thing to be in the moment where you're making the decision and now you're having to go through the harm and the stigma of a transfer.
Can you let our viewers know a little bit more about MAID itself? And it feels to me like this policy, the policy of MAID, was designed to avoid situations like this.
Yeah, I mean, the MAID legislation in Canada doesn't specifically speak to this. As many people will know, legislation for MAID is federal, it's under the criminal code, but healthcare is delivered provincially. So every province or territory has their own system of rules and policies. In BC, there is a specific agreement that allows faith-based hospitals to opt out of doing things like MAID that aren't in line with their theology. Our perspective and the basis of the case is that that hospital as a building does not have conscience rights, what we call conscience rights under the charter. Individual clinicians do, and certainly a clinician in a hospital like St. Paul's would never be expected to participate in a MAID death. Um, However, we don't believe that the building itself has those rights or conscience.
How many faith-based hospitals are there in Canada, and what tend to be their rules about assisted dying?
Yeah, so there's over 100 faith-based hospitals that are publicly funded. We're talking specifically about those funded by taxpayer dollars. That counts for about just over 13,000 beds, largely concentrated in BC, Alberta, and Ontario, where there is more faith-based healthcare. And with the exception of PEI, Nova Scotia, and Quebec, which have policies that don't really allow this practice to occur, every other province and territory does allow faith-based facilities to opt out of allowing MAID on site if they choose to do so, and most do.
What what could the justice decide in this case? What are the possibilities?
Yeah, I think the possibilities are they decide that hospitals should be required to allow MAID to be provided on site, in which case, in British Columbia, they will have to break that agreement that they have with the Denominational Healthcare Association and change their policies. And then our hope, and I think the expectation, is that because this is a constitutional decision, that will flow across the country. So all hospitals that are faith-based and publicly funded would be required to change their policies to allow MAID to occur on site.
If someone is thinking about MAID, Helen, what should they keep top of mind, especially today?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure if you are in an area, there's some cities, for example, where there's only a faith-based hospital, you should be thinking about this. You should be advocating for yourself. Obviously, the court case will take time, but people should be thinking about, more importantly, I think, talking to their loved ones, having those final discussions, making sure that all of their plans and paperwork is in place so that they're able to spend the time that they have left with their families and their loved ones rather than worrying about logistics.
Helen, realistically, do you think this could end up in the federal Supreme Court?
Yeah, I think much of the Canadian made legislation has been driven by the courts and particularly the Supreme Court. So I would not be at all surprised to see this end up in the Supreme Court.
Well, Helen, if the goal of the family is to ensure that this doesn't happen to anyone else in the future, the simple act of bringing this case is going to bring a lot of publicity to this story, which should ensure that more people can avoid this in the future. So I thank you, Helen Long, for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.